Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we're talking about something that holds millions of people back from fully participating in social life: fear of judgment in social gatherings. And I am not talking about mild nervousness before a party or slight self-consciousness in groups. I am talking about the intense, consuming fear that everyone is watching you, evaluating you, and finding you lacking. The fear that makes you rehearse conversations in your head, second-guess everything you say, analyze every facial expression for signs of disapproval, or avoid social gatherings altogether because the anxiety feels unbearable. This fear makes you believe that one awkward moment, one wrong word, one social misstep will result in devastating rejection or humiliation. And if you experience this, you are far from alone. Fear of judgment is one of the most common psychological struggles, and it is deeply rooted in both our evolutionary wiring and our individual experiences. But here is what you need to understand. This fear is not protecting you, it is imprisoning you. The judgment you fear is usually far less harsh than the judgment you impose on yourself, and the cost of organizing your life around avoiding judgment is enormous. So today we're diving deep into the psychology of fear of judgment, where it comes from, why it feels so powerful, how it manifests in social gatherings, the cognitive distortions that fuel it, the devastating costs it creates, and most importantly, how to work through it so you can show up authentically in social situations without being paralyzed by what others might think. Let us start by understanding what fear of judgment actually is at a psychological level, because it is more complex than just caring what people think. Fear of judgment, which falls under the broader category of social anxiety, is an intense, persistent worry that others are negatively evaluating you, that you will say or do something that reveals your inadequacy, and that this perceived judgment will result in rejection, humiliation, or social exclusion. At its core, it is the belief that you are being scrutinized and will be found deficient, combined with the belief that such judgment is catastrophic and unbearable. This fear operates on several levels simultaneously. There is the cognitive level, where your thoughts are consumed with what others might be thinking about you, the emotional level where you feel intense anxiety and shame, the physiological level where your body activates the threat response with racing heart and sweating, and the behavioral level where you engage in safety behaviors or avoidance to prevent the feared judgment from occurring. Now let us talk about where this fear comes from, because understanding the origins helps you realize this is not your fault, and it is not some fundamental flaw in your character. Evolutionarily, humans are intensely social creatures who evolved in small tribal groups where social acceptance meant survival and social rejection meant danger or death. Being valued by your tribe meant access to resources, protection, mating opportunities, and cooperative support. Being rejected meant isolation, vulnerability, and potentially death. So our brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social evaluation and rejection. It is literally a survival mechanism. The problem is that this ancient system is now operating in modern contexts where social judgment is rarely life-threatening, but your brain still treats it as if it were. This is why fear of judgment can feel so visceral and overwhelming. Your amygdala is responding to perceived social threat with the same intensity it would respond to physical danger. On an individual level, fear of judgment often has roots in childhood experiences. If you grew up with critical, judgmental, or perfectionistic parents who frequently pointed out your flaws, compared you unfavorably to others, or gave approval only conditionally based on performance, you internalized that you are being constantly evaluated and that your worth depends on meeting impossible standards. If you experienced bullying, rejection, or humiliation during formative years, your brain forms strong associations between social situations and danger. If you were shamed for making mistakes or showing vulnerability, you learned that being imperfect in front of others is unsafe. If you were praised primarily for achievements rather than for who you are, You developed a belief that your value is performance-based and that people will judge you harshly if you do not excel. These early experiences wire your brain to anticipate judgment and to interpret ambiguous social cues as negative evaluation. Temperament also plays a role. Some people are born with more sensitive nervous systems and higher baseline anxiety, which makes them more prone to social fears. Cultural factors matter too. Cultures that emphasize conformity, saving face, or hierarchical social structures often create more fear of judgment than cultures that value individualism or acceptance of differences. And social media has dramatically intensified fear of judgment by creating constant, visible evaluation through likes, comments, and public scrutiny of curated self-presentations. Let us discuss how fear of judgment specifically manifests in social gatherings, because recognizing these patterns is crucial. Before the gathering, you experience intense anticipatory anxiety. You might spend days or weeks dreading the event, imagining all the ways it could go wrong, rehearsing conversations, planning what to wear obsessively, and feeling physically ill as the event approaches. You might consider making excuses to avoid attending because the anxiety feels overwhelming. During the gathering, you engage in hypervigilance and self-monitoring. You are constantly scanning faces for signs of disapproval, analyzing your own performance in real time, monitoring your voice and body language, and trying to detect whether people like you or are judging you negatively. This intense self-focus makes natural, spontaneous interaction nearly impossible because you are not actually present in the conversation. You are watching yourself have the conversation and critiquing your performance. You also engage in safety behaviors, which are actions you take to try to prevent the feared judgment. These might include staying quiet to avoid saying something wrong, agreeing with everything to avoid conflict, keeping conversations superficial to avoid vulnerability, positioning yourself at the edge of groups rather than the center, staying glued to your phone as a shield, drinking alcohol to reduce inhibitions and anxiety, or attaching yourself to one person you feel safe with and never leaving their side. These behaviors provide temporary relief but maintain the fear long-term because you never learn that you can handle social situations without them. You also probably experience physical symptoms, blushing, sweating, trembling, racing heart, dry mouth, nausea, which then creates secondary anxiety because you worry others will notice these symptoms and judge you for being anxious. This creates a vicious cycle where fear of judgment causes physical symptoms which cause more fear of judgment. After the gathering, you engage in extensive rumination, replaying every interaction, analyzing everything you said, cringing at moments you perceive as awkward or stupid, and convincing yourself that everyone was judging you negatively. You might apologize excessively to people via text for things that were not actually problematic. You might vow to never attend social events again. This rumination maintains the fear and makes future gatherings even more dreaded because you have accumulated more evidence of your perceived social failures. Let us talk about the specific cognitive distortions that fuel fear of judgment, because your thinking patterns are maintaining the fear more than actual social reality is. First, there is mind reading, where you assume you know what others are thinking about you without any actual evidence. You see someone glance away and conclude they think you are boring. You notice a brief silence and decide everyone thinks you are weird. You are treating your anxious interpretations as facts when they are just guesses. Second, there is the spotlight effect, which is the cognitive bias where you drastically overestimate how much others are noticing and evaluating you. Research shows that people are far less focused on you than you imagine. They're mostly thinking about themselves, their own concerns, their own social performance. But anxiety makes you feel like you are under a spotlight with everyone scrutinizing your every move, when in reality most people barely notice the things you agonize over. Third, there's catastrophizing, where you imagine the worst possible outcomes of perceived judgment. You think that one awkward comment will make everyone hate you forever, that people will reject you completely, that your reputation will be destroyed. The reality is that most social missteps are forgotten quickly. People are generally forgiving, and your anxiety is predicting catastrophes that almost never materialize. Fourth, there is personalization, where you interpret neutral or ambiguous events as being about you and your inadequacy. Someone looks at their phone and you assume you are boring them. A group laughs and you assume they are laughing at you. Someone does not respond enthusiastically and you conclude they dislike you. Most of the time, other people's behavior is about them, their mood, their concerns, their personality, not about evaluating you. And fifth, there is all or nothing thinking, where you believe that if anyone judges you negatively, or if you make any social mistake, it means total failure and rejection. In reality, social acceptance is not binary. People can like you overall while finding some things you do annoying. Or they can think you are great even if you had an awkward moment. Now let us discuss the devastating costs of organizing your life around fear of judgment. First, there is the cost to relationships and connection. When you are consumed by fear of judgment, you cannot be authentic, vulnerable, or fully present in interactions. You are too busy monitoring yourself and managing anxiety to genuinely connect with others. This prevents deep, meaningful relationships from forming because people never really know you. They only know the carefully controlled version you present. Ironically, the fear of rejection that drives the self-protection actually creates the disconnection and loneliness you were trying to avoid. Second, there is the cost to your sense of self and authenticity. When you are constantly adjusting your behavior, opinions, and presentation to avoid judgment, you lose touch with who you actually are. You become a chameleon, shape-shifting to fit what you think others want, and over time you may not even know what you genuinely think, feel, or want because you have spent so long suppressing your authentic self. Third, there is the cost of missed opportunities and experiences. Fear of judgment causes you to avoid situations where you might be evaluated. You do not pursue friendships, romantic relationships, career opportunities, hobbies, or social experiences that could bring joy and growth because they involve risk of judgment. You play small, stay invisible, and opt out of life to stay safe from evaluation, but the price is a life unlived. Fourth, there is the mental health cost. Chronic fear of judgment creates persistent anxiety, contributes to depression, fuels perfectionism, and often leads to low self-esteem and shame. The constant self-criticism and anticipation of negative evaluation is exhausting and takes a serious toll on psychological well-being. And fifth, there's the cost of self-fulfilling prophecy. When you approach social situations expecting judgment and behaving awkwardly because of anxiety, you sometimes create the very reactions you fear. Your anxiety makes you stiff, withdrawn, or overly apologetic, which can make interactions genuinely awkward, which then confirms your fear that people judge you negatively. So how do you actually work through fear of judgment and show up more authentically in social gatherings? Let us start with cognitive strategies. First, practice catching and challenging distorted thoughts in real time. When you notice yourself mind-reading or catastrophizing, pause and question it. What actual evidence do you have that this person is judging you? What else could explain their behavior? What would you tell a friend who was thinking this way? This cognitive restructuring helps you develop more balanced, realistic interpretations of social situations. Second, conduct behavioral experiments to test your fears. If you believe that sharing your opinion will result in rejection, try sharing a mild opinion and observe what actually happens. Most of the time, you will discover that the catastrophe you predicted does not occur, which weakens the fear over time. Third, practice self-compassion rather than self-judgment. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you care about. When you make a social mistake or feel you came across badly, respond with kindness and understanding rather than harsh criticism. Self-compassion actually increases resilience and makes you less afraid of judgment because you know you will treat yourself gently, even if things do not go perfectly. Fourth, shift focus from performance to curiosity and contribution. Instead of monitoring how you are coming across, get genuinely curious about other people. Ask questions, listen actively, try to understand their perspective. Think about what you can contribute to the gathering: a compliment, a laugh, support, interesting information rather than what you can extract in the form of approval. This outward focus reduces anxiety and makes you more engaging to be around. Fifth, practice exposure gradually. You do not have to jump immediately into your most feared social situation. Start with lower stakes gatherings and progressively work up to more challenging ones. Each time you survive a social situation without the catastrophe you feared, you build evidence against the fear. Sixth, develop a healthier relationship with judgment itself. Here is a radical truth. Some people will judge you, no matter what you do, and that is okay. Not everyone has to like you. Not everyone has to approve of you. Some judgment is inevitable, and it does not destroy you. What actually destroys you is organizing your entire life around trying to prevent judgment that you cannot fully control anyway. Acceptance that judgment will sometimes happen paradoxically reduces its power over you. Seventh, work on building genuine self-worth that is not dependent on external validation. Your value as a person is inherent. It is not determined by whether others like you, approve of you, or think you are impressive. This is deep work that often requires therapy, but it is transformative. When your sense of worth is internal, external judgment loses much of its sting. Eighth, remember that everyone is the protagonist of their own story, not a supporting character in yours. Other people are far too absorbed in their own lives, concerns, and self-consciousness to spend much time evaluating you. The spotlight you fear is largely an illusion created by anxiety. And ninth, if fear of judgment is severely limiting your life despite your best efforts, please work with a therapist trained in cognitive behavioral therapy for social anxiety. Therapy provides structured exposure, cognitive restructuring, and skills training that can dramatically reduce social anxiety. You do not have to live in constant fear of judgment. This fear is treatable, and people recover from it all the time with proper support. If this video resonated with you, please share it because fear of judgment is incredibly common but rarely discussed openly. Drop a comment: what social situations trigger your fear of judgment most, and what has helped you manage it? And remember, your fear of judgment is understandable given your history and brain wiring, but it is not accurate or helpful. Most people are not judging you as harshly as you fear, and even when they are, it does not define your worth or determine your future. You deserve to show up authentically, to connect genuinely, and to participate fully in social life without being imprisoned by the fear of what others might think. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.